Well, thank you, Phil. I appreciate the introduction. Just so you all know, Phil takes the speaker series very seriously. I remember when he first reached out to me, I remember my first response was, "Sure, Phil, I'd love to do that. Sounds awesome. You mean 2021, right? You can't possibly be planning that far ahead." And he said, "No, I mean it. It's 2022 is when I want you to be here." I do appreciate the invite. It's great to be here with you all. And I look forward to talking about the hidden history of Dayton, Ohio. It came out in February of 2021. I do have on the kind of the agenda here a bit of an introduction or about me, but that was kind of already taken care of here. So yeah, I've lived in the Dayton area, city of Dayton the whole time, 16 years. Been a planner with the city since I got here in 2006. Currently the planning division manager. Live in St. Anne's Hill Historic District. Our house was built in 1865. We live on Dutoit, which is right across the street from Stivers School from the Arts. Maybe you guys know where that's at. Yeah, you can call it it depends if you want the gentrified version or the old school version, whether you call it Dutoit or Dutoit, however you want to say it. Pleased to be here and talk about my perspective on hidden history of Dayton. The initial outreach was kind of interesting about this book. I do like to give little tidbits kind of behind the book kind of things. I think people usually find that interesting, although we'll go through each chapter in the book as well. The outreach came from the publisher Arcadia History Press. I think he had discovered a presentation I had done of a Choctaw style, a PK style, 20 slides in 20 seconds. It was on YouTube. It was called Dayton Obscura. It's gotten into some of the darker history or hidden history or overlooked history in Dayton. And so History Press reaches out and they say, "We think you'd be great for our haunted series." I said, "Well, I appreciate that. That's great, but I ain't writing about ghosts." Deaths and mysteries and ghosts. This is not my thing. He said, "Oh, never mind. I think you'd be great for our hidden series." So now you're talking, right? Now that sounds good to me. And so that's how the conversation initially went. This was the first thing I've had published in this kind of sense. I've written plenty of planning stuff, and of course staff reports and all kinds of things like that for my professional career, but this was the first publication I've had of this nature. And in terms of process, that initial outreach occurred in August 2018. I ended up getting about 6 months or so behind schedule, which was fine with them and expected. I sent the draft of the text over to History Press in March of 2020. It's kind of interesting, I started the book and the world was one way and then kind of finished it in another way. I was working from home a lot, actually through the end of the publication here. I'll talk about some funny stories about that here towards the end. Finally hits the shelves in February of 2021. So it's a pretty fast time frame in my mind, a little bit, probably longer than they preferred, but they push you to get your draft in and the images all done. You've got to supply all the images. I became a photographer, and that leads us to where we are today, I suppose. So just thinking about what I had set out to accomplish here. Let me get this pop-up off this computer. The main core objective here was to identify items, features in today's urban environment. If you're just walking around Dayton, that may not even seem all that special to you. You don't even necessarily know there's an interesting history behind them. But they have these fascinating stories associated with fairly typical everyday buildings or items, sometimes natural features. That's really what I was going for. And I've been saying, we all love the Wright brothers, Kettering, Deeds, Patterson, all the classics, and they're wonderful and interesting. But this was an opportunity to kind of go another layer here, and that's really the stratum that I was going for, a little bit beyond the big names, and talk about more vernacular history that one could encounter if you're walking down 3rd Street or 5th Street or Main Street or Dutoit, whatever. It's fairly Dayton-centric, as in the city of Dayton boundaries, fairly Dayton-centric. There's certainly stuff outside of the Dayton boundaries and some stuff around here. We'll get to some stuff very quick that's relevant to Centerville-Washington. But that's been my life. I can only write from my perspective, right? I've never lived in the Dayton region outside of the middle of the city of Dayton, so I think you naturally write from your voice is found in your perspective. I was really lucky in my experience at the city of Dayton to have colleagues who were really into this kind of history, and they would take me around, drive me around the city of Dayton, introduce me to various neighborhoods, and really helped me understand how deep Dayton history runs. It's really the roots, the character of the city and the region, and I wouldn't have gotten that sense just learning about the classic names, the Dayton names, which are well written about, but extremely formative to our city as well. I wanted to look at some concepts to maybe broaden one's view of what historic means. I love Dayton's historic districts. We've got, I think, 20 National Register historic districts, most of which are listed locally as well. Protected is what that means, that they're listed locally. I live in one, St. Anne's. I live by Oregon, a great one. I love McPherson Town, South Park, right down Bar Grafton Hill. But old houses aren't everything for what's historic, and I think sometimes we kind of lose perspective of that. And while the historic districts are my favorite thing about Dayton, I think there's a lot of things that aren't necessarily designated in some way, aren't necessarily formally protected in some way, that are every bit as interesting and deserving for sharing our heritage. Period of significance is a term you use a lot in historic preservation. We're in this interesting time period now. I'm sure you guys encounter this, where some of the mid-century or even past the mid-century buildings are now considered historic. And there's a large chapter in the book about the mid-century time period, what Dayton was going through at that time, which is of course very well connected to Centerville. And so we've designated and talked about and promoted a lot of turn of the century stuff in Dayton. Wonderful historic districts, but I think now it's time to start thinking about what's next for historic preservation. So we get to talk about some of the mid-century stuff, and of course I write about stuff 400 million years ago as well, which we'll talk about here shortly. I kind of hit up on the third main bullet point there, that history is everywhere. On every street, you could consider that historic in terms of why it's there, how it came to be, where the name comes from, who might have lived there, what it looked like 50 years ago. It's not just those areas that are most prominent. And ultimately, history is at the core of how we relate to the place where we live. It's the deep roots that I think certainly keep one grounded, but at the same time, I think of all the things that Dayton's been through, going back decades and decades. It's a city built for 262,000 people, and now it has 141,000. So there's been tremendous challenges, but I think the deep roots of our history here have kept Dayton extremely relevant, and will help Dayton thrive in the future. So I'm going to go through there's only 8 chapters, so I'll go through each of the 8 chapters, kind of talk about what the main points were, and show some images here shortly to express the contents of the book. To know it all, you got to buy the book, which are here, and I'm not here to make money off of book sales, and we'll talk about that here later on as well, but just kind of hit up the high points here. So the first chapter kind of gets into natural resources, basically. And here's where you talk about the glacier and how it formed, Dayton's waterways, of course, the aquifer, you got to get into that. We know about, it's funny talking to this crowd about limestone and our wonderful underground bounty and how that impacted our today's built environment. Some of the region's best buildings were built of Dayton limestone. And the connection here with hidden, because you might not think, oh, that's just all that geology stuff. I don't know what's, I thought we were going to learn about ghosts. That those who first arrived in Dayton, had no idea that they were, settling in this place with this tremendous underground bounty that helped Dayton thrive and will help sustain Dayton well into the future. There was no way to have known that. And so we talk about, Dayton, of course, being the shallow sea, and we talk about the impact of the Wisconsin Glacier. Some of the images, you may know some of these. These are both kind of off Wilmington here. These are two former quarry sites, which provided, some the stone for some of Dayton's most well-known buildings, including the courthouse, and you all have wonderful stone resources in this area as well. But you can kind of see the former quarry sites. The one on the left is next to the Wilmington high-rise there, and the one on the right is off of Wilmington on a place called Rushland Drive. That one's, it doesn't have the water feature to it, but they're all over the place. Some former parks in Dayton, former quarry sites. You guys have a couple, I know a number of them here in the Centerville area as well. So I don't have to get too much into this topic because you guys are probably experts on it. Showed some of the buildings in the book that were made from Dayton's limestone. The image on the left is one you probably know. That's the chapel leading into Woodland Cemetery. The picture on the right is Oaks Quarry Park up near Fairborn, which is a really surreal place to be. You guys may have been there before. You really feel like it's the bottom of a shallow sea. You can sense what what Dayton may have been like, the Dayton area may have been like. An interesting tidbit from this natural resources chapter is the waterways in Dayton before the glacier. It's thought by some experts that in fact where the Great Miami River flows, it actually used to flow the opposite direction north and become a tributary to what was called the Taze River, which then flowed across Indiana into Illinois. So the glacier had tremendous impact in Dayton. But I thought it was an interesting thing to pull out of the natural resource chapter that in fact where the Great Miami River is today, the water very well could have flowed northward. So second chapter, we get into some biographical narrative, get into some of the big names in terms of settlement of Dayton, and a little bit more that people may not know about. Those names such as Wilkinson, Dayton, Ludlow, St. Clair have our primary streets bearing their name, and also were part of the really the initial purchase of the Dayton as we know it today. And I think there were some pretty revealing stories about the nature of these individuals that come up through history. Wilkinson, probably his most primary moniker at this point is artist in treason. Some people say that he was one of the more treasonous individuals in American history. He was a secret agent for Spain, received actually a pension from Spain. Jonathan Dayton was arrested for treason, never really got completely, it never really completely stuck with him, luckily for him. And these guys were both working with Aaron Burr, partially in an effort to cleave off parts of the Northwest Territory for the benefit of Spain. And Arthur St. Clair, another one of the big four founders or purchasers of the Dayton property, is known for one of the worst military defeats in American history. And then Ludlow was kind of the good guy who was really primarily known as a land developer or land surveyor. So we hear these names all the time, and they feature prominently in our street names, but the book gets into some of the background on who these individuals were and what they're most known for. You can't talk about Dayton names and biographies without talking about Daniel Cooper. who really saved the town after those four attempted to purchase the land for Dayton. Eventually that purchase was nullified. Dayton wasn't really going to exist in any way at that time unless Daniel Cooper had stepped in and bought the land at the price that ultimately it was bought for. So Cooper really is, you know, the main guy in the Dayton story. Laid out the streets as they are today, laid out the locations of, you know, the public commons and primary public buildings. So chapter 3, we talk about the canal, and not in the most, you know, we know the history, and we know Dayton was a canal town, as were many cities to the north and to the south as well. What I was trying to get at in chapter 3 is really how the canal impacts what we see in Dayton today. So the canal was very instrumental in the development of the Webster Station area, which is just to the east of downtown Dayton. You know, before the canal, commerce was centered on Main Street in downtown Dayton. The canal going to the east of the Main Street area suddenly brought commerce and industry to the east in what's today's Webster Station, and a lot of those industrial buildings exist in that area to the east of downtown because of the canal. And these are the buildings that are being, you know, rehabilitated, adaptively reused for residential, and have really been a primary draw to repopulating Dayton. And it happened because the canal brought in industry and these exceptional buildings that are now being reused today. We have images in the book of like, you know, sometimes there's mysteriously wide roads in Dayton and you're not sure why. Sometimes it's for various reasons, but sometimes it's because it's actually the canal path, like Rita and of course Patterson Boulevard. And then we show some relics that are still remaining today of the canal itself. So, you know, one of the interesting things about the canal and its impact on Dayton, you know, the first leg of the canal was from Dayton to Cincinnati. And there was, you know, a number of years, I think it was maybe 15 years or so, where the canal hadn't been fully completed all the way through Ohio, but there was the Dayton to Cincinnati leg. And the impact of that was, that suddenly overnight Dayton became an international port city. And so for cities north of Dayton, your Troy, your Tipp, your Piqua, your Sidney, Dayton was extremely valuable as the way that you got goods further south from the port city of Dayton. Kind of a cool image here. I don't know if you guys have seen this before, but this is along the Mad River. The image on the right is remaining canal abutment from where the canal went over the Mad River, so that remains in the city today. Just an example of some of the things called out in the book that if you're on this bike path, you might think, well, that's weird, why is that there? Well, it carried the canal over the Mad River. You got the buildings from the canal time period, still very much in use and relevant today. The image on the right is some of the, at that time, on the left, the really storage buildings, light industrial buildings of that time period, still in existence today. Chapter 4 is called At a Crossroads. In this chapter, the book examines the pre-interstate roads that went through Dayton. Dayton again found itself in a very advantageous position as the Dixie Highway utilizes the Dayton route, the National Road, and of course all the roads that connected Cincinnati and Dayton. So really important to making Dayton the major city that it became as it found itself on these major roads. One of the interesting things called out in the book here is the Dayton Cutoff route, which I'm showing as being south of the National Road. And basically the National Road connected capitals, right? So Columbus to Indianapolis. And that means that it missed Dayton, as we know today, and the National Road does today. And so to counter that, because the city would obviously want to take advantage of these long-range travelers, the Dayton Cutoff was constructed which ran south of the National Road through Dayton, over to Eaton, and then back up north, and we met back up with the National Road at Richmond. And it was completed in such a quality way that it actually became the more popular route than the National Road itself to use the Dayton cutoff and go through these cities. And it's an interesting tidbit in terms of the development of Dayton. Numerous images showing what's still out there today or what was around recently that took advantage of these at a crossroads themes that emerge in this chapter, including US 35, as well as the Paul Deneau building on what's that? That's Dixie at that point, across from the Walmart there. Chapter 5 talks about the Dayton Project. The Dayton Project was a component of the Manhattan Project. The triggering mechanism for the atomic bomb was developed in Dayton as part of the Dayton Project. In oftentimes residential neighborhoods. So you guys may know of the Runnymede Playhouse in Oakwood, and of course the mound itself, which came later after a lot of the polonium research was accomplished in the heart of the city of Dayton in some ways. For example, this is the Unit 3 site in Dayton's Wolf Creek neighborhood. Image on the left is, of course, the wartime era image, and all these, or most of the buildings from that time period still exist in the middle of a residential area in Wolf Creek, and this is where major research occurred on polonium, which became the triggering mechanism for the atomic bomb, and these buildings are just sitting out there. I did include in the book, and I won't go through all the various buildings and their uses here, but do include a map of what each building was used for at that time. It's just almost eerie to think about as you're just, walking or driving down West First Street, to think, that's where the decontamination room was. That's where the lab work occurred. Another Dayton Project site, this one in downtown. This is on 3rd Street, 3rd and Sears, and this building has since been rehabilitated, which is interestingly called the Manhattan. So cheers to the developer for recognizing the historic significance of this building at 601 East 3rd Street. This was known as the warehouse building of the Dayton Project. So I've been through this building before it was rehabilitated, and I gotta tell you, it really struck me when I'm going through the building and the sign is on one of the doors and it references this laboratory and the laboratory director, and it just made me think, this wartime period just wasn't that long ago, and here I'm in this building referencing, laboratories. This is, the Dayton warehouse of the Dayton Project. The building, by the way, got a clean bill of health from the EPA, so don't worry about that. It'll be a lovely place for offices, but it's just one of those stories that is just an incredible thing, and you just wouldn't think about it if you're just driving down 3rd Street, to think about these world-changing events that occurred in the heart of Dayton. So I mentioned the mid-century chapter of the book, and I take a little bit of a more nuanced view of the urban renewal and highway time period. There was an incredible amount of demolition, lots of great stuff were lost. There were major social impacts that occurred through all that, and I certainly don't try to overlook that. I do think that it's history, though. And it's history for Dayton, it's history for every major, or even less so, American city at that time. So the image is up here on the screen right now, just to give you an idea of what we're looking at. The one on the left is actually from the cover of the book, but this is 5th Street near St. Anne's Hill, looking westward. You kind of see the before and after there. Dayton Towers is the building being constructed on the right image there. So this is just to the east of the Oregon District. And the perspective that I kind of take here is, as the 1960s comes along, and Dayton's losing population for the first time. New malls have been built, offices are already beginning to follow. People are leaving at a rate that Dayton just couldn't have imagined before that. And I think there was a great deal of fear and a sense that something has to be done. And many things were done, oftentimes not to the benefit of historic preservation, although even those areas where many buildings were lost are still part of the history and DNA of Dayton. And that's kind of the perspective that I was going for there. So, you know, we got some interesting before and after images. I just can't get over images like this. I just love them. Real renderings. This is the Sinclair area, you know, 3rd Street, or coming off of I-75. You know, with the sense they're going for here. You know, happy motoring. This is the way of the future. You know, so I included as many of these renderings, I guess, as they'd let me, just try to give somebody a sense of what it must have been like at that time to try to convey to Dayton residents and Dayton workers of, you know, the future's bright. Well, this is our competition. We're going to compete with the rapid suburbanization, and you know, it certainly was a very nervous time period in Dayton. Some more renderings here. This was shown right where Sinclair is today. This is from what was an urban renewal project that never really got built, called Midtown Mart. Midtown Mart urban renewal area was projected to be where today's Convention Center and Dave Hall Plaza, now Levitt Pavilion, and the Transportation Center garage is. This was going to be, you know, the shopping district of downtown, and you know, downtown did end up having its number of retail establishments come and go, and Midtown Mart was going to be the heart of the future of retail. Some of these images are just wild, showing what was there on the left and where things were at their depth on the right after the demolition. So where you're seeing the empty blocks are where the Convention Center are today, and Dave Hall Plaza or Levitt Pavilion. Speaking of which, here's some images from that very block where today's Levitt Pavilion is located, showing after the clearance. On the right, you kind of see the freshly installed Dave Hall Plaza with this vast open space and its new hotel across from a convention center. And you know, actually, Dave Hall Plaza, which you know received a lot of complaints in modern years before Dave Hall or Levitt Pavilion was constructed, Dave Hall Plaza itself was state-of-the-art landscape architecture at the time. We talk about in the book a lot of buildings that have been reused, those that did, that were built around that time period and now still exist. This is First Place Apartments, was Stratford Hotel. Numerous examples of this in this chapter. So chapter 7, we kind of look at really the heart of this goal to connect things of today's built environment with the past. This is, you know, gets pretty nuanced in terms of you know, things that are easy to overlook that you wouldn't necessarily consider historic if you didn't know. Again, driving home this theme that history is indeed everywhere. There's a history behind everything you see walking down the street. And this is the one that most people connect to the most in terms of feedback that I've heard. You know, so you guys may know this site. It's at Carillon Park. I didn't put a lot of Carillon Park stuff in here because it's a historical park. And I didn't include a lot of stuff that's on the National Register either, because that would be hard to be considered hidden if it's on the National Register. But I just can't get over the quarantine hospital that existed up the hill at Carillon Park. Here we see what it looked like. This is related to smallpox, what it looked like on the left, and then the remnants of it up the hill behind Carillon on the right. And of course, it was really interesting to have thought about this site before quarantine re-entered our everyday vernacular, but here we are. So this slide actually means a lot to me. It's about a simple one flagpole. This is at the Parkside Home site in Dayton, where Kettering Fields is, just north of Kettering Fields. Parkside Homes was a very large, densely built public housing project. You can kind of see in the yellow circle where this flagpole was. It was in front of the office for Parkside Homes. the flagpole does show up in the image on the bottom left there. This is kind of fun to do a presentation like this, to be able to include images that I couldn't make into a book because they're just not of a high resolution. You know, couldn't get a high resolution image of it for the book, but I was able to put them into a presentation like this. Anyway, Parkside Homes gets torn down. No idea why they would leave behind a flagpole. If you're walking out there, that's just off of Kiwi Street near Helena. If you're walking out there today, you come across this and you say, why in the world is there a single old flagpole in the middle of this, what's now an open space? Actually, it's really nice out there today. They left the trees too, thankfully. And I think this, having a focus on a single flagpole, for me, really drives home the theme and objective of the book. And that is that, what is the story in terms of why this is here? And I get into a little bit of the history of Parkside Homes itself and how it came to be in Dayton, all based on a single flagpole that they easily could have torn down. This slide shows the Potter's Field that exists just north of Irving Avenue in Dayton. This one isn't one that they probably like to talk about a lot. It's south of the nicer ball fields, just north of Irving. And we did go out there one day, and we did come across a marker or a stone, which is shown on the left-hand side. It certainly would qualify as hidden. You guys, I'm sure, know what typically a Potter's Field might be used for, those who don't have the means for other types of burial. I loved this area.
Tony?
Yes?
Where is that Potter's Field at again?
So, yeah, so this, I thought, okay, I'm kind of showing here. So this is Irving Avenue. It's just north of that. So Oakwood, was it Schaefer? I think comes in like this, right here. And you got your Patterson Park fields.
UD is to the left.
UD is to the left. Yep. Yes.
Yeah, it's right down there at the bottom.
Yep. And these are the upstairs fields up here. And these are the downstairs ones along Irving. And then you go back through the woods here and you can come across this, and that's where we encountered that marker there. So this was a fun, eerie experience to go out here, and some of you may know the history here of a failed new town to the west of Dayton called Newfields. It was going to be part of the U.S. federal New Towns program, where several new settlements were going to be established in suburban areas outside of what was then thought to be crowded and dirty cities. This was going to be a suburban type of area, but still with the, kind of the new urbanist type of feel to it, carved out of parts of Dayton and Trotwood and Jefferson Township. The federal New Towns program was largely considered a major failure. There may have been one or two that eventually got established and thrived, but new towns never really got built. And so you go out there today, and then where Sycamore State Park is today was created because of the failure of Newfields, this new town, this new village that was going to be this wonderful, natural, densely built, suburban environment. And you go out there today, you can see, where the development was going to occur and did not. You can see this was the town center building, which was actually pretty cool mid-century modern architecture. But that building got built, the town center, the water features out there, the little lake, some bike paths, and you go out there and it's just completely quiet. It is just eerie. And so ultimately the state park got installed, and there's still been some suburban development around in this area, but you go to where this town center was going to be this thriving town center in the middle of this wonderful new city, and it's eerie out there. It's pretty cool. I got into Steve Wayland Boulevard in the book. You guys may know Steve Wayland Boulevard, which is a just bizarrely wide, short highway that is an exit off of US 35. And the story behind Steve Wayland Boulevard is a really interesting one in that, really the goal, the concept was to build another inner belt highway that connected Wilmington Avenue, went behind, what's now 10 Wilmington Place, but the insane asylum as they called it then, went behind that, ended up taking the course of Steve Wayland Boulevard at the time, continued up north, connected up with Stanley Avenue and made its way back around to 75. So I guess it could be considered a way to get from the southern suburbs around downtown and up to 75. Well, that project was blocked by mostly neighbors in the Walnut Hills neighborhood of Dayton, as well as some neighborhoods north of 35, such as Springfield, Burkhart. But Steve Whalen, what's today's Steve Whalen Boulevard, that segment got built. It was going to be called the Wilmington connector, the Wilmington-Stanley connector, and only the Steve Whalen Boulevard got built to like a highway standard, right? Interstate highway standard. And so, if you were just driving around today, and I hear it all the time, in my professional career, what is up with that thing? Why is that so wide? Why can I go, 60 miles an hour through the heart of these East Dayton neighborhoods? Well, that's because there's this, story of the attempt to build this interbelt highway around downtown Dayton, and Kiwi ended up really kind of taking on this role. If you go through Kiwi Street through Dayton, it becomes somewhat of a an interbelt type of feel to it. But anyway, people ask about what's up with this Steve Whalen Boulevard, and I get to tell the story behind it in terms of what it was envisioned for, and how that stopped. Another example of a fun story I got to tell, and you guys may know this, Sean Acres up off of North Main Street. I know it has a deep connection with a lot of Dayton area residents. But think about the future. If you go out to this site now off of North Main Street and you see this one single cottage out there and it says Sean Acres in front of me, it's like, well, what in the world is that? Well, Sean Acres, was the large children's facility. It had those 13 buildings, 13 cottages up there, and in 2013 they were all demolished except the one remaining cottage of Sean Acres facility. They kept this one because this was the only one-story cottage, but it still signifies a deep story that occurred at the facility up there off of North Main Street. This is the Haymarket urban renewal area just to the east of the Oregon district. This was a fun one because this image on the left shows the demolition well underway. This is Wayne Avenue through here. So the demolition is well underway. And what's interesting to me is if you go out there today, Dayton Towers is off to the right here. If you go out there today, you can clearly see where one of the major streets of this neighborhood existed. It's been vegetation is somewhat taken over, but there's still a road bed that goes through this open space area. Somebody cared about it and planted the trees, and then there's even benches along it as well. But you wouldn't necessarily know that if you were just going out to visit a friend, say at Dayton Towers, that a pre-urban renewal street went through that open space area. Final chapter is the subterranean underground chapter. There's a lot of tunnels in this tunnel discussion in this particular chapter. This is kind of behind Dayton Daily News building on Main Street, where the tunnel entrance is to the NCR network of tunnels that connected all the buildings underground. They had a tremendous network of tunnels where you didn't have to go outside or interact with the public to get from building to building. Through this tunnel system, and you can see the entrance clearly out there today. But you go out there and you think, well, what is that? Is that where they keep the snow plow or something like that? It's the entrance to NCR's tunnel system. Another tunnel that was a really fun one to discover here. There's a tunnel that goes under 3rd Street near downtown Dayton. This is like Bainbridge Street. I was able to get a picture. I know it's hard to see on that, and the picture on the right isn't in the book, but it came from Dayton Daily News, where this tunnel, on the picture on the left, you can see where the entrance to the tunnel went under 3rd Street. And wouldn't know that today if you go out there, that there was actually a pedestrian connection underground, right under 3rd Street, connecting Bainbridge up to near the 2nd Street Market. So this is on 3rd Street, just south of the 2nd Street Market. That was eventually filled in. Obviously, wouldn't have been great for the police. Probably didn't like it. Wasn't great for an easy thing to secure. But one of those things that contains interesting relics of the past. A number of other tunnels and underground infrastructure are discussed in this chapter. This is a view from the one that connects two of the Delco buildings on either side of First Street. It's Mendelssohn's building, the big Mendelssohn building to the building to the north, which is Delco Lofts. Just an example image showing some of the underground stuff. Wouldn't know it. If you're out there downtown, you go to a ball game, didn't know there's a tunnel going underneath the street connecting the Delco buildings. So just kind of things that we try to reveal through the book here. I keep saying we. I'm so used to talking like that from a professional perspective because I always want to talk about our staff, you know, but I don't know why I've adopted that for the evening. So a couple tidbits here I just want to conclude with, some funny anecdotes maybe. So this was never a money-making venture for me. It was all done for fun and the love of Dayton and contribute to Dayton's historic narrative. So, and I had to sign a bunch of stuff too, by the way, when I got the book contract, saying, you know, oh, I won't spend any City of Dayton resources or any City of Dayton time related to the book, which makes a lot of sense, right? I should do my job and when I'm at my job. So I had to sign a bunch of stuff like that. Cool, no problem. But you know what I thought was funny is that when we all started working remotely, nobody cared that I was using all the stuff I bought for the book for work. But that's okay, that's life. So one night I'm out there working on the book and just grinding away. I finish a chapter, leave the laptop open outside, go in, go to bed. I come in, I get up that next morning, come downstairs, my wife has that laptop upside down. She said, you idiot, you left your laptop open in the rain last night. I had all this book stuff on the laptop. So she has it upside down, water's coming out of the laptop. And we had to go on vacation the next day. And so we leave on vacation. Of course, the whole time I'm picking up that laptop in my book. So get back, try to turn on the laptop, doesn't even start up. So luckily, and you know, because why would I back all this stuff up on a hard drive or flash drive? Of course I didn't. Luckily though, this computer store off of Schroyer was able to amazingly recover the hard drive and save me totally. So then I bought another laptop, and this really became not a money-making venture for me by the time I bought the second laptop for the book. So second story relates to the spine of the cover of the book. You know, you got to go through all these approvals through the process of writing a book with History Press and Arcadia, of course any publisher as well. And finally get to a place where I'm comfortable. Books get delivered, you know, I ordered a whole bunch of them. And I take a box down to Cincinnati and I signed a bunch for my family, my parents. And by the time I get done signing them, I look at that spine of that book here on the side of it. And it says Hidden History of Dayton, Hiddend, you know, not even a word really. And this is after everything's hit the shelves, everything's approved. I was just mad. Nobody's driven with more anxiety back up to Dayton to see if I approved that cover with a typo on the spine or not. And it turns out that I didn't. I approved it with the proper words, Hidden History of Dayton, Ohio. And I guess the Rogue D was introduced right before they hit print. But they were cool about it, History Press. They ended up sending a whole new series. They saved the ones, you know, replaced the ones that they could. Some had already been on the shelves with this typo on the cover of the book. But the nice thing now is, like, if somebody does have a hidden version, I say, you know, you got a limited first run edition. You got the error card, the error baseball card, you know. So you're a true fan if you have one of the ones with the Rogue D on the cover. So that was quite a job. So they were cool about it and they replaced what they could. But I know those type of ones are still out there somewhere. So now I think it's great when I see it. You were one of the first adopters, right? You were one of the first ones in, but man, that was not a good discovery to find. So, you know, I'll just talk a little bit more about the process as I finish up here. You know, this is my first publication of this type. When they say they do light editing at History Press, it's light. They're not joking about that, which is fine. They do their job. But it's really on the author to have a clean manuscript when you send in your draft. It's really on the writer to have it as close as possible to being print ready. There was a number of challenges in terms of deciding what to put in, what to leave out. What's well known about Dayton history, what can be considered hidden. There was a lot of decisions that had to be made along those lines. But the last point I want to make here, and it's just been amazing for me, is that, and I'm saying Dayton, I mean the Dayton region. Dayton supports Dayton. Nobody had to say, Tony, I really want to check that out. Tony, how are things going? Of course, we're going to buy your book. Dayton books through Arcadia History Press are some of the best sellers because Dayton cares about Dayton, and that relates to the deep roots that we have as a region. And Dayton's been very supportive of my effort with this book, and I know other authors as well. I know Andrew Walsh is part of the speaker series who wrote Lost Dayton. He can attest to this as well, and it's just been pretty inspiring for me to receive the support from Dayton residents, Dayton area residents, in terms of hidden history. So that's the essence of my presentation. I got some contact information up there if you ever want to follow up, but I'm not leaving right in here at this moment. Happy to answer any questions you may have. Other than that, that's all I got.
Does anybody have any questions?
I have a question. I've always wondered why the Mad River is called the Mad River, number one, and why is the Oregon District called the Oregon District?
Yeah, I don't get into any of the nomenclature too much there. There are definitely theories of each other. There's not really, I don't know, there's a clear reason you ever hear for the Oregon District, although I know I've read various possibilities, but I don't know that any one jumps out at me right now at this time. Those stories are out there though, but yeah.
Anybody else have any questions? Well, Tony, on behalf of the Centerville-Washington History, I'd like to thank you for your presentation, and we have a little gift certificate here for you.
Oh, thank you.
All right. From that, we're complete for tonight. I just want to let you know that next month I have Mike Williams, who's going to do one on FDR's Confidential Crusader. It's going to be another good one. So please show up next month. Love to see you here. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you all. Thanks so much.